Hey, what is up everyone? In this video, I'm going to share with you the hash rate that I'm getting out from this GPU, which is the Nvidia RTX2060 12GB version. And the specific card that I have here is the Gainward Ghost GeForce RTX 2060. So let's do a very quick unboxing right here. So the RTX 2060 was launched back in 2019 and it has 6GB of VRAM. And what we have here is a newly refreshed version of the RTX 2060 with 12GB of VRAM. So personally, I have the previous version of the RTX 2060 by Zotac, and that card is actually the first GPU I got when I started cryptocurrency mining. And I got it used via local Facebook marketplace, and it is still mining right now, giving me about 33 mega hash per second at 92 watts mining Ethereum. So now let's look at whether this 12GB version will give us more hash rate for Ethereum mining, and we will also be looking into the hash rate on mining Ergo, Ravencoin and Flux. After that, we will be looking into the profitability at the point of recording this video, and we will wrap up this video by discussing whether you should be getting this GPU, and if you were to get this GPU, what are the caveats. And I should say, this is a very clean looking card. So right now what I have to do is actually pop this GPU right at my test bench right over there. The RTX 3070 Ti is still on my test bench right now, and I'll need to install this and test this GPU out. A quick note about this newly refreshed RTX 2060 12GB version is the TDP right now is at 185 watts as opposed to the 6GB version which has a TDP of 160 watts. The great news is it is still require only one single 8-pin. So when it comes to your PCIe strengths, planning and management later, it will be fairly easy. So let me put this on the test bench, boot it up, do a bunch of testing, and you will see the result right now. Whenever I get a GPU for mining, I have the habit of finding the maximum memory clock that the GPU can handle without crashing. So for this GPU, it crashes immediately when the memory clock goes to 1200, which is kind of disappointing because I have seen other reviews that the card can go to plus 1300 on the memory clock without crashing. So I guess I might have a bad silicon lottery or they have a good one. At stock settings mining Ethereum, this RTX 2060 12GB version is getting 29.6 megahash per second at 132 watts, dropping the core clock by 502 and raising the memory to 1175. This card is getting 35.5 megahash per second at 141 watts, which consumes even more power. This GPU runs very unstable at plus 1175 on the memory clock. It wouldn't really crash immediately, but it will crash in less than 5 minutes. So it is pretty much unusable at this setting. Next, I locked the core clock at 1100 using the curve editor in MSI Afterburner, and this immediately dropped the power consumption to 92 watts without losing any hash rate. So I ended up using 1150 on the memory clock, locking the core clock at 1100, and then I key in these settings in T-Rex Miner using command lines. I let this setting runs for a good amount of time and it doesn't give me any more crashing. So I end up with 35.1 megahash per second at 89 watts to 90 watts mining Ethereum, which is not too bad, and it is better and more efficient than my RTX 2060 6GB edition. Moving on to Ergo, this card is getting 56 to 57 megahash per second at 122 to 126 watt mining at stock settings. Bumping up the memory clock immediately raised the hash rate as well as power consumption. As this card was mining Ethereum stable at 1100 on the memory clock, I went ahead and raised the memory clock to 1100 and it crashed in a couple of minutes. To be honest, this card is actually giving me some hard time figuring out the overclock settings. So I ended up settling with just plus 1000 on the memory clock. Dropping the core clock to the maximum did not do much on this card. As you can see, it is mining at around 67 MHz per second at 131 watts. So to drop the power consumption, we need to undervolt this GPU by locking the core clock just like what we did on Ethereum mining. Locking the core clock at 1100, I would say that this card is doing very great. It is mining at around 67 MHz per second with just 83 watts. The GPU runs cool with such undervolting, and we can drop the fan speed in order to drop the fan noise in our mining space as well. Mining Ethereum and Ergo are memory dependent. Locking the core clock will drop the wattage and temperature by a good amount, so I highly recommend you to do so. Next up, let's look at Ravencoin, which is no longer using a memory-dependent algorithm, so expect the card to run a lot hotter and consume more power. Mining Ravencoin is using the Kappa algorithm, so the hash rate, power consumption, and overclock settings that you use will be the same with ProcPower and also Firo Power algorithms. At stock settings, this GPU is getting about 18.7 MHz per second at a whopping 185 watt, which is basically the TDP of this card. Looking at the temperature and my fan speed, to give you a context, I'm running this test on my OpenAir ITX test bench with only a single GPU, and I am in an air-conditioned room. So we definitely need to power limit this card as it is consuming a lot of power and running really hot. I have some experience mining Ravencoin with a couple of Nvidia and AMD cards. I would say that for most GPU I have tried, we have to raise the memory clock by a good amount until it does not give any increment in hash rate, and we need to bump up the core clock by a little bit as well. So first, let's bump up the clock speed first. I settled the memory clock at plus 1000 and the core clock at plus 175. With this setting, we are getting above 21.5 MHz at the same power consumption, which is around 180 watts to 185 watts. But this is not going to be the final hash rate that we are getting because we need to work on the power limit. Did you realize the temperature of the card is dropping a little bit? Yup. That's because it was getting toasty right here and I'm making my air condition to work harder. Well, not because the card gets cooler, it is because of my AC. For core intensive algorithm, undervolting is not the way to go, and usually the efficiency will increase as we drop the power limit. For most cases, the more power limit you drop, the more efficient this card you will get because it will usually drops more wattage versus the hash rate. So not to my surprise, the best efficiency is achieved by dropping the power limit to the lowest, which is 67% in my case. At this setting, this GPU is mining at 18.2 MHz per second to 18.3 MHz per second at around 124 watt with an efficiency of 148 kHz per watt. As you can see, to drop the power consumption and the temperature, we are sacrificing a good amount of hash rate as well. I would say, after finding a good overclock setting for the core and memory clocks, the next thing is to drop the power limit until the power consumption and heat generated are manageable for your specific situation. If you have a rig with multiple GPUs mining Ravencoin, the heat can build up very quickly if your airflow is not enough. Now let's look at Flux. Mining Flux is a little bit tricky. I realized the hash rate can fluctuate a bit, and throughout my entire testing, I would say that new overclock settings will take some time to be reflected, and once you settle with an overclock setting, you can restart the miner. Sometimes you might get a higher hash rate or the miner just get a little bit more stable. I should also note that the hash rate bump by overclocking is less significant throughout my test as well if you compare it to other algorithms. You can even leave it as stock clocks and start power limiting to manage the heat. Another thing to mention about Flux mining is the miner you use. I'm using G miner now as I get higher hash rate compared to other miner like Mini-Z miner. I'm literally getting 10% more hash rate right off the bat switching from Mini-Z miner to G miner. So you need to test this with a couple of miners out there and use the one that gives you the highest hash rate. At the stock setting, this GPU is getting 38 to 39.5 solutions per second at 178 watts mining Flux. Next, we need to bump up the memory clock and the core clock. Remember that the hash rate would take time to be reflected. The hash rate does not really increase by much by overclocking as well as mentioned just now. The improvement that you're gonna get is not a day and night difference. Bumping up the core to 150 and 800 on the memory clock, we are getting around 40 to slightly above 41 solutions per second. If we raise the memory clock to plus 900 and even plus 1000, the hash rate did not really improve much, but we get occasional crash on the miner. So I settled with plus 150 on the core and plus 800 on the memory clock, and I start power limiting this GPU. Dropping the power limit to 70%, we are getting around 38 solutions per second at around 150 watts. The hash rate and wattage do fluctuate a little bit. And same like Ravencoin mining, basically the more power limit you drop, the more efficient this GPU becomes. Now let's talk about profitability. The most profitable coin to mine right now for this GPU is Ethereum, and theoretically I can ROI this GPU in about 14 months as I pay 2100 ringgit for this GPU or about $500 US. But there is one issue right here. As the co-founder of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin has confirmed that Ethereum will move to proof of stake during this summer, so technically we only have about 3 to 6 months to mine Ethereum if there is no delays. It has been delayed for several times and there are discussions out there saying that there might be a delay again due to a couple of reasons, but I think I would rather get myself prepare for Ethereum to move into proof of stake rather than being too bullish and optimistic that there will be a delay for the merge. At least I'm mentally prepared for it if it were to happen in 3 to 6 months time. So if Ethereum goes away from this list, the next most profitable coin to mine would be Firo and Flux, which are about 32 to 35% less profitable in terms of fiat value. If you're looking into buying this GPU for mining, understand that Ethereum could be unmineable in 3 to 6 months time, so the profitability will change if Ethereum move to proof of stake. I've made a video talking about things and changes that miners will experience and see after we can no longer mine Ethereum. So be sure to check that video out. I'll link it in the YouTube card at the top right corner as well as in the description below. Another thing to consider is the pricing of this GPU in your region. I have seen this card, which is the 12GB version of the RTX 2060 being sold for up to $800 in certain countries and regions. So I would say it much depends on what price you are able to get it for. I would say that somewhere around $500 is considered okay to invest in, as you will be looking into ROI in 1 to 1.5 years, granted there is no massive crash in the crypto prices. Alright, so that will be all for this video. So after my beginner's guide on cryptocurrency gets so much love from you guys, I was looking into creating more content about GPU mining. So I was looking at my GPU the other day and I tell myself, why not? Let me just make a hash rate video about this new GPU that I have gotten. There are already a couple of videos showing the hash rate for this particular GPU, but you know, GPU is different although the model can be the same. Like mine, I might just got a bad silicon lottery. So I just make my version of it to give you guys some variation. So there you go, my very first GPU hash rate video here in my channel. Hope you find this helpful. So if you like this kind of GPU hash rate video, subscribe to my channel, and if I see a lot of subs coming in from this particular video, that's how I get to know that you guys are interested in this kind of video. With that said, thanks for watching and I will see you when I see you. Peace out.